I'm really grateful you've been able to represent a third way in some of these conversations. And I'm curious on the actual kind of legal argument, do you have any thoughts on Chiles's kind of argument around freedom of speech? And like, would you say to Chiles, I actually do think your practice does go against what the state is saying? Or are you saying, from what I understand what you're saying, you actually can practice what you're practicing? Like, do you see her as actually pushing against the law, or she's just creating a fight for the sake of religious freedom, using the freedom of speech as kind of a leverage where there doesn't need to be a fight?
Yeah, so my initial impression was very much the latter. My initial impression was very much that this was being framed as a religious kind of a freedom of speech argument. But when I read what she was claiming that she wanted to do in therapy, my impression was that's absolutely fine under the law. If somebody comes to you and they have gender distress and they have a history of severe depression and trauma, you absolutely can address their trauma in therapy. That's
Yeah.
totally fine with a minor. Minors come to therapy to address trauma all the time. And
Mhm.
so that's fine under the law. You can help people with identity exploration and development. And if a teen comes to you at the start of therapy and says, I would like to align with my sex, I would like to live in accordance with my sex, and you say, okay, I can work with you. Tell me a little bit about that. You'd have to be honest that we don't have evidence-based treatment interventions that do that. But you can certainly, if somebody says, I want to align with my sex, work with them as a minor. And even in the cases of somebody who comes to therapy and says, I'm same-sex attracted or I'm gay and I want to refrain from sexual activity as a minor, can you help me find coping skills? The law allows for adaptive coping skills. Um, what I will say is in some of the writing that she does, she starts to, as time goes on, in some of the documentation submitted to the Supreme Court, seemingly say, no, I really do want to do things that would count as conversion therapy. Like, I really do want to claim that people can align with their sex through therapeutic intervention, that God's best for people is alignment with their sex. And I ought to be able to talk about that explicitly with people. And the law is banning that. And I think that gets maybe not so much at what the law is banning, but maybe a very different approach to therapy that I have a lot of thoughts about.